The shocking assassination of Swedish Prime Minister Olof Palme in 1986 sent shockwaves across Sweden and around the world.
There were actually several witnesses that saw clear signs that this was not just a lone killer.
It's a crime that has remained shrouded in mystery for decades.
And that it was a very much organized setup to kill our Prime Minister.
With suspects like PKK, Petterson, and the Skandia man, well, that's until now.
I was involved in a war, and in a war, people get killed, and in a war, people get bombed.
The bombings, the sabotage, restaurants, and so forth. There were many children also killed.
For years, the world has speculated about who was behind this heinous crime. Was it a lone wolf, a political enemy, or something far more sinister?
I know Bertel. He was very, very good. Bertel was involved with intelligence on a few occasions in South Africa.
The South African security police was involved in that. Your Prime Minister was too liberal and too anti-South Africa. That is why he died.
The trail of evidence leads us to the dark and dangerous corridors of South Africa's notorious hit squad, C10.
Somebody got to it. Henry, there is a conspiracy. You understand? I believe it now. I didn't believe it formerly, but I believe it now.
And the brutal and sinister leader of South Africa's black operations, Craig Williamson.
I estimate it would take no longer than a month, maybe 6 weeks, to physically eliminate the ANC.
How?
Hunt them down, catch them, shoot them.
Med folk som både fra andre land og i Sverige, som han så på forskjellige partier, eller møter, hvor han talte, kjente igjen de samme ansiktene, og hadde en viss uro over hva var det som egentlig foregikk. Så det var jo mange
Så Olof, det at han kjente en oro?
Vi snakket om det fordi det var noe som kalte seg sosialdemokrater, som var med utgangspunkt i USA.
EAP.
Ja.
Today we unravel the truth because new evidence has emerged pointing to not one, but 3 individuals directly involved in the murder. But the conspiracy doesn't end there. Our investigation reveals a chilling connection between these South African operatives and members of the Swedish security police with extreme right-wing ideologies. How deep does this conspiracy go, and who exactly was pulling the strings? And now, the identity of Olof Palme's killer has been revealed by 3 independent witnesses, and they all point to South Africa and the apartheid regime. This is history with Magnus. But before we begin this journey, remember to subscribe for more videos about assassinations and history. The witness Inge Morelius stops at a red light at the intersection of Tunnel Street and Svea Street. From this vantage point, he has a clear view of the Dekorima shop and notices a man standing there. The man's behavior is peculiar enough to catch Morelius's attention, prompting him to keep watching.
Han var där för att göra någonting som han hade ett uppdrag eller han var där för att göra ett jobb, så uppfattar jag honom.
The man is wearing a coat and a dark winter hat, appearing as if he is looking for someone.
Han rörde sig väldigt vältränat, militäriskt, målinriktat.
Morelius describes the man's strange behavior as militant and determined, giving him an eerie sense that something significant is about to happen. At the same time, Police Unit 3230, with 2 officers that belong to the extreme right in Sweden, is only 150 meters away from what will become the murder scene in only a few seconds, with 1 officer standing outside the police car. The 2 officers claim they shut the door right before the shots were fired, and therefore didn't hear the shots. Even though they are so very close when the shots are fired, they claim ignorance to what happened. I won't delve into all the sightings of policemen and walkie-talkies surrounding the murder, as I have extensively covered that in my documentary, The Police Trail, but if you are not familiar with this, here is a quick summary. The police trail has emerged outside the police murder investigation, mainly from journalists and other independent investigators, who have pointed out police measures or the actions of individual police officers as strange and might be linked to the murder. It's about policemen who were on duty during the night of the murder, but also off-duty police who have been seen in and around the murder scene with walkie-talkies, acting suspiciously. These policemen, many belonging to the infamous baseball gang, all had extreme political views and were arranging meetings in Stockholm with people from the military and police, discussing how they could get rid of the hated Olof Palme. According to this theory, this could have formed the basis of a motive to assassinate the Prime Minister, and would explain why the police functioned so poorly during the investigation that it was an intentional reduction in efficiency by the police and the investigators. Michael Lund, a former member of this group turned author, describes what they were up to in an interview with a Swedish newspaper. We were called the King's Boys, and there was a circle of police officers who went to far-right meetings with the military and saw Olof Palme as a traitor to the country. We were out of control. We abused people, embezzled money during house searches, and planted evidence. If we had been convicted of everything we did, it would have been a couple of life sentences. Back at the cross-section of Tunnel Street and Svea Street, Inge Marelius now becomes a witness to what he later describes as an execution.
Ingenting annat än regelrätt avrättningsslakt. Så allting är så oerhört effektivt. Han gick runt för att kolla av att ja, vad säger man i dåliga amerikanska filmer? Mission completed. Det är jag helt övertygad om. Han ville vara säker på att han hade gjort det han skulle.
The murderer then pauses, scrutinizing the Prime Minister to confirm that the shot was deadly. Marelius watches in shock from his car, noting how the act was executed with chilling efficiency and determination, before escaping into the night. All the witnesses said that his steps were quick and agile. He does not have a limp like Christer Petterson, but climbs the 89 steps quickly and with ease. Several of the policemen who were part of the baseball gang were also part of a secret paramilitary group called Stay Behind. Stay Behind was set up by the American intelligence as part of Operation Gladio together with Swedish secret police SEPO to counter a Soviet invasion. Carl Colby, the son of former head of the CIA William Colby, confirmed in an interview that his father was one of the figures that set up the secret network in Sweden.
The Stay Behind network was operating throughout the world. The setting that up was done in tandem with a very aggressive attitude on the part of the Americans, with several of the top CIA operational people. Americans were terrified that countries like Sweden would just be occupied by the Soviets, the communists, or sympathizers. Stay Behind networks were made up of mostly people who had had experience in the underground, small groups of people operating in secrecy.
In the early 1990s, two whistleblowers from the Norwegian military exposed the existence of a covert group, sparking a major scandal. These groups operated illegally without the approval of Parliament, and in response, a commission led by Supreme Court Judge Ketil Lund was established to investigate the matter. The commission found evidence of illegal surveillance and weapon smuggling, but no one was prosecuted or held accountable. Judge Lund later expressed to the media his belief that much of the illegal activity had been concealed from the commission, stating, "We were only shown the tip of the iceberg." In Sweden, the people in Stay Behind were former military personnel and police officers, and almost all belonged to the extreme right in politics. Carl Colby also says that there was a Stay Behind operation going on in Stockholm the very evening Palme was murdered. The people in these groups also had ties to South Africa and the dreaded hit squad C-10 and the intelligence services there. All of these people saw Palme as Sweden's enemy because of what they thought was a soft stance on communism. The Americans were also dissatisfied with the Swedish Prime Minister, as he had been one of the strongest critics of the Vietnam War, making the Americans call back their ambassador from Sweden twice. When hearing the news, Nixon and Kissinger had a conversation caught on tape.
The Swedish Prime Minister has bugged off too. We've just got the press ticket. The Swedish Prime Minister. Somebody got to him. Henry, there is a conspiracy. Do you understand? I believe it now. I didn't believe it formerly, but I believe it now.
There's no doubt that Olof Palme was a thorn in the side of the Americans, but also to the extreme right in Sweden, who feared that Palme would come to some kind of agreement with the Soviet Union when he was going on a state visit in April 1986. Stig Larsson's investigation has brought 3 new names that has ties in some ways to the Palme murder. Alf Ennerstrom has been described as Sweden's biggest Palme hater and was gathering money from his network of rich businessmen to run a campaign against the Prime Minister, comparing him to Hitler. His alibi for the murder was that he was home with his partner when the murder happened. However, in his most recent interview, he claims that there were Swedish policemen who asked him for money in order to kill the Prime Minister, but that he turned them down. He also claims that there was a Swedish policeman that killed Palme and that he knows who was behind the assassination.
Och då gick vi till en restaurang som hon kände till, och den låg i änden på Sveavägen. Och vi promenerade dit. Och så promenerade vi tillbaka. Och då gick vi förbi, och då så såg vi de här poliserna. Och jag undrar, vad är det? Jag kände ju igen dem. Vad står de här för mitt i natten? Och så hade han en pistol i handen. Alltså det var en polis som sköt Olof Palme.
However, his partner says that she wasn't with him. She had gone to bed and he was on his way out.
Och då la jag mig efter 9:30 någon gång. Och då så kom han ju och sa, stod han inne och sa att han skulle utlägga på bilen. Ja, så det är ingen konstigt med det. Men sen tänkte jag efteråt, det var ju fredag. Då lägger man ju inte på någon bil. Och sen så somnade jag naturligtvis. Sen så vaknade jag till av att han stod vid dörren, vid glasdörrar. 11 eller 12 eller vad.
Which brings the question. What was he doing on Svea Street around the time of the murder? Was this a huge coincidence? Or was he there because he knew what was going to happen and wanted to be a spectator? Or, more sinister, was to take part in the assassination in some way? Victor Gunnarsson was another far-right extremist who hated Palme. He would attend meetings where Palme was giving speeches and was a member of the far-right extremist group, EAP. The Norwegian Prime Minister at the time and leader of Palme's sister party in Norway, Gro Brundtland, told a reporter that Palme saw the same people at different conferences, and he felt very uneasy about this.
Vi snakket om ting som skjedde i Sverige, med folk som både fra andre land og i Sverige, som han så på forskjellige møter hvor han talte, kjente igjen de samme ansiktene og hadde en viss uro over vad var det som egentlig foregikk. Så det var jo mange
Så Olof det at han kände en oro?
Vi snakket om det fordi det var noe som kalte seg sosialdemokrater, som var med utgangspunkt i USA.
EAP?
Ja, det var det som vi snakket om, og så fortalte han ting som skremte meg, og som jeg skjønte at han egentlig var litt urolig over. Det har jeg jo tenkt mye på.
On the night of the murder, Gunnarsson told 2 women that in Stockholm you can be shot in the back for your opinions. After several tips from people, Gunnarsson was arrested by the police and they even found gunpowder residues on his jacket. However, only hours before he was due in court, he was released and no further investigation were done by the police. In 1994, Gunnarsson was found murdered in Watauga County in the U.S. He was tied and naked when they found him, with a shot to the temple execution style, and his body was later dumped in the woods. In his apartment, the police found a book titled He Shot Olof Palme, where Gunnarsson was pointed out as the killer. An American policeman, Lamont Claxton, was later convicted of kidnapping and murder of Gunnarsson. Ivan von Berschen, a former Yugoslav intelligence captain, claims that he was personally offered $2 million to assassinate Palme and asserts that Gunnarsson was killed because he knew the identity of the killer. Bertil Weiden, identified in Stig Larsson's archive as the middleman, was a well-known Palme hater who has relocated to the Turkish side of Cyprus. Here, he broadcasts highly anti-socialist radio programs and remains protected from extradition to Sweden. Weiden was an agent for Swedish Secret Service, but also an important fundraiser for right-wing extremist causes, and had extensive connections, including ties to South African intelligence, the CIA, and British MI6. He was accused in an English court of the 1982 burglary at the Pan-Africanist Congress office in London, but was acquitted. Peter Castleton, a South African C-10 operator, named Wedin as a suspect in the assassination of Sweden's Prime Minister Olof Palme, as well as for the March 1982 bombing of the ANC office in London. Wedin was also suspected of bombing the ANC office in Stockholm in 1986, but he has denied any involvement in these crimes. He also was involved in the stay-behind groups, had the rank of captain, and was the leader of one of the cells. According to Stig Larsson, Wedin served as the intermediary between South African intelligence and the extreme right in Sweden, possessing a vast network of contacts within the intelligence community, both in Sweden and internationally. In a secretly recorded conversation, Wedin is very open about his network.
Har du jobbat hos det?
Ja, vi samarbetar med många saker.
Har du jobbat för eller med att se?
Ja, lite grann med när jag var i Amerika. Och samarbete med seniora personer från CIA och MI6.
He was even involved in a secret and very powerful intelligence agency called 61, who had direct contact with the Prime Minister of Great Britain and the President of the United States.
Dels jag samarbetade med och arbetade för organisationen. Jag hade uppdrag för den här organisationen att föra ner till vissa länder i Afrika. Att dammsuga nätet och sätta reda på alla möjliga uppgifter om. Vårt 61 hade direkt access till Ronald Reagan och Margaret Thatcher. Träffat Margaret Thatcher.
He was a contact person for both sides, acting as the go-between for Western intelligence and the South African apartheid regime. Vic McPherson, a former apartheid operative, participated in South Africa's black operations, which included bombings and assassinations in the 1980s, such as the execution of Dulcie September in France in 1986.
The bombings, the sabotage of restaurants and so forth. There were many children also killed. But if it had to happen, it would not have bothered us.
These black operations were conducted under orders from the highest authority in the country.
We had these operations, what we would call black operations. You know, there might come an instruction from the President or from the Minister of Defense.
What about the Palme assassination? Have you heard any talk about that?
I can't comment on that.
McPherson also confirms that he knows Bertil Wedin very well, and that there was extensive contact between the two groups.
I know Bertil. He was very, very good. Bertil was involved with intelligence on a few occasions in South Africa. I used to meet them.
According to McPherson, Craig Williamson, the leader of all South Africa's black operations in Europe, was Wedin's handler, assigning him tasks for South African intelligence and authorities. Eugene de Kock, head of the infamous hit squad, C-10, was responsible for the murders and torture of ANC activists and other targets during the 1980s and early 1990s.
In this canteen, Gene de Kock one night bashed an askari to death because he lost his firearm. And he killed the guy inside this canteen with a snooker cue. He's beaten him to death. The next morning it was blood all over. And then they took him away from here, badly beaten, and then pretended to the rest of the farm people, Askaris, that he's fled the country. He's left for Lusaka, I think.
Following the end of apartheid, he testified before the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and was convicted on 89 charges, including murder, receiving 2 life sentences plus 212 years in prison. It was during his trial that he testified that South Africa had been involved in the murder of Olof Palme, pointing his finger towards Craig Williamson. Craig Williamson oversaw all South Africa's black operations in Europe and successfully infiltrated the ANC, leading to numerous arrests and murders by the regime.
I was involved in a war, and in a war, people get killed, and in a war, people get bombed.
Williamson had a grim vision for the future of apartheid.
I estimate it would take no longer than a month, maybe 6 weeks, to physically eliminate the ANC.
How?
Hunt them down, catch them, shoot them.
There was a time when he was getting an award, Craig Williamson, from the South African regime for his murderous acts. And the minister giving him the award said to him, "I don't know if I should shake your hands. There's so much blood on them."
A South African ANC activist identified Williamson at a conference in Sweden where Palme spoke just a week before Palme's assassination.
Williamson shouldn't have been there by this time in Sweden. He's known as the spy. I got a very cold feeling. I really got a very cold feeling. And of course, a week later, Olof Palme was assassinated.
Williamson was also seen in Stockholm, staying in one of EAP's apartments on the night of the murder. Goran Borkdahl, a Swedish diplomat in South Africa during the 1980s, uncovered top-secret military intelligence documents. These documents revealed that the South African apartheid regime had classified the Swedish prime minister as an enemy of the state, which, according to Björkdahl, was essentially a death sentence. To verify the documents' authenticity, Björkdahl traveled to South Africa and met with a former intelligence general who confirmed their validity.
I told Chibota's signature of the military intelligence.
Yeah.
That is the intelligence report about Palme. But that expression, enemy of the state, was that an expression that was used?
Yeah.
That, so to speak, makes him qualified to become a target.
When asked about Olof Palme and how an operation to murder him would look like, he gave a description eerily close to what actually happened.
And going for a stroll without guards when the person who took Palme out definitely knew about his habits.
Do you have any idea of what kind of team that would be assigned to carry out such an operation?
You need people on the ground to assist for a long time.
The pattern becomes increasingly clear. There was cooperation between Sweden and South Africa in the murder of Olof Palme at a very high level. Goran Borkdahl suggests negotiating between Sweden and South Africa to try to solve the murder.
I spoke to the general in the military intelligence and asked him, what do you think? Would it be possible to promote a kind of negotiation where Sweden, or the prosecutor, gives immunity against prosecution, and the guys who did it, they come forward and tell the story?
The negotiations begin, and in this way, the general has admitted that South African intelligence was part of the murder.
And that the two intelligence services in South Africa and Sweden, they were going to prepare the solution or how it should be presented.
It becomes very important that the matter is registered as a specific intelligence project. Then the two countries at an intelligence level sit down and say, fine, this is how we can do it. That's what I'm saying is that it should be put into writing, but it has to be agreed at a formal level.
The negotiations raises hopes that the truth about what happened that cold February night in Stockholm might finally come to light. The proposal is sent to the Swedish authorities, who, some months later, hold a press conference announcing they have solved the murder.
Det som vi kommer att presentera här idag är att vi kommer inte runt en person som en misstänkt gärningsman. Stig Engström, som vi har omnämnts i media som Skandia-mannen.
In an astonishing twist, the Swedish authorities and government blame the late Stig Engström, better known as the Skandia man, as the likely murderer. Since Engström has passed away, Swedish law prohibits any trial or legal actions against him, as he cannot defend himself, and they officially close the case. Astonished over the announcement, Goran Björkdahl calls his contact in South Africa to find out what has happened.
I'm sorry to call you a bit late.
No problem. It's very simple. The South African government,
Yes.
together with the Swedish government, has agreed to drop this and no further investigations are to be done.
Okay.
Leave the benefit to the countries and the Muslim
Okay.
That is agreement between Sweden and South Africa. Both sides have stopped the investigation.
In one swoop, the Swedish government ends and buries the hunt for the real murderer in the biggest and most expensive criminal investigation in history.
So there was a deal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There is finally a deal, but a deal to put the lid on, it seems.
Yeah.
There must be something really, really sensitive that cannot see the light of the day. And we don't know exactly what that is.
The Swedish government probably realized that opening up the Palme murder to a South African connection would reveal a scandal extending not only to South Africa, but also into the Swedish police and security police. It would have been the scandal of the century if any of these organizations were found to have people involved in the murder. So they point out the Skandia man as the most likely killer and close the case on Olof Palme. The reasons that it's impossible for the Skandia man to be the culprit is that he appears at the murder scene 1 to 2 minutes after the shots have been fired, and it's impossible for a middle-aged designer to run the distance he would have had to cover in that time. It would have taken a well-trained runner at least 4 minutes, and no one reported Stig Engström running, out of breath or sweating, when he arrived at the murder scene. This was a military-style ambush from start to finish, and the name of the real shooter has come from 3 different witnesses that has no connection to each other. One of them was a Swedish security police officer who saw the man at Säpo's headquarters a few days before the murder. He spoke with a strange English accent, and she had never seen him there before and wondered who he was and what he was doing there. 10 years later, she saw the same man on TV and contacted the Palme investigators with his name, but she quickly realized that they weren't interested in the information she had. The former hitman and C-10 operator Dirk Coetzee confirms the identity of the killer.
The actual chap that, according to the information, murdered your Prime Minister was an ex-Rhodesian, now Zimbabwe, saloon scout by the name of Anthony White.
Anthony White has denied any involvement in the assassination and has never been questioned by Swedish or any other authorities.
When we heard that the South African security police may have been involved, we say, yeah, absolutely. But of course, it's one of those things that probably never will be proved one way or the other.
Who believes in coincidences? It was obvious.
Remember to subscribe and give this video a like, and check out my documentary, The Police Trail, for more information on the Palme assassination. And I hope to see you in the next one.